Chapter 17. A City of Glass and Sky.
Hey, you made good time,
said Merek as Sem and Ally walked downstairs. Otto stood behind the Ark, checking their miracle machine from top to bottom, while Merek sat at the computer.
A privilege to see you here, Merek. What's the occasion?
Otto and I were just reviewing the new data from your return message. Also for Ally's new guardianship celebration.
You ever learn what's wrong with my plane? I'd hate to have to take it back from you than watch it gather dust in the hangar.
I replaced a choke and starter the other day. If you want, I can take you out for a spin one evening and show you,
said Merek. Sem opened his locker and snickered to himself.
I would rather risk my life 1,000 times among an endless number of unknown worlds than step foot in that death contraption.
Ally reached the bottom of the steps, gathering her own conclusions from their conversation.
So, wait, that plane you fly is Sem's?
Still is. Used to be Erland's, but now it's his,
said Otto, continuing to work.
If he'd ever use it, that is. Come on, for a man raised in a world among the clouds, it seems silly to think that you hate heights.
Flying, not heights. And I have my reasons. One long story with never enough time to tell it.
Otto put his voltmeter away and walked back over to the computer. Merek moved out of his way, clearly afraid to ever stand between Otto and the computer ever again.
Where are we going?
Asked Ally from the stairs.
Otto, what's the news?
Asked Sem. Sem pulled his backpack from the locker and began placing his medkit, a flashlight, and his binoculars into the bag.
You won't need to bother changing clothes this time. Looks like you'll be in the early 22nd century. Your outfits may look outdated, but no one should think much of it.
Ally stared down at her outfit, wondering how her style could ever seem outdated.
There's a backpack in the locker you can use,
said Sem, pointing to the one next to his. Ally walked over to the locker with a plaque on the front. She read the name plaque. Area. Ally opened the locker to find a dark red and white backpack hanging inside, next to a few other dusty women's outfits. She pulled the backpack off the hook and proceeded to open it. Inside was a small supply of survival gear. She turned the bag around and saw the same name from the locker written in white pen ink on the strap. Sem watched Ally look at the name, doing his best to move on. His heart felt heavy watching her hold the bag.
Take care of it for me. Please.
Ally looked up at Sem, seeing the same broken look as when he had given her the goggles. She put her hand on his arm with a smile.
I will. I promise.
Sem half-heartedly smiled back at her. He cleared his throat and turned back to his locker.
What's the activity like, Otto?
Asked Sem. Otto scooted his chair back from the computer, with Merek reading over his shoulder.
Busy. Real busy. This one's not going to be like the last. Looks like you guys are going to be dropped into a major city, so expect to run into a few faces when you first get there.
10 hours in a metropolis full of people to search for one person. Those odds don't seem favorable.
Ally muttered as she slipped the backpack on around her shoulders. Sem hobbled over next to Merek and plugged his communicator into the computer. After the OK beep from the computer, he reached for Ally's communicator on the desk and plugged it in to do the same.
Remember, if you guys can't find who it is you're looking for, get out of there. Believe it or not, your lives are worth more than one universe alone. It's better we not lose more lives than we have to out there. You're no good to anyone here dead.
Sheesh, when you put it like that.
That goes against my nature,
said Sem, hearing the computer beep. He unplugged Ally's communicator and handed it to her.
I don't care if it violates the laws of nature itself. You get back here as soon as you can, or I'll drag you both back myself,
argued Otto, sounding deeply concerned.
I'll be waiting for the day when you come chasing me across worlds.
Sem zipped up his backpack and slung it over his shoulders as he closed his locker door. Ally grabbed the goggles off the top of the lockers and handed Sem his own pair. She pulled the goggle strap back and placed them over her eyes while Sem did the same.
You guys ready?
Asked Otto. Sem stepped into his usual stance, ready to take off in his usual sprint. Ally adjusted her goggles to fit better and took her position next to him.
Ready as we'll ever be,
said Sem, his eyes fixed on the ark's rings ahead of him.
Just follow my lead. Same as last time. Only this time, let's not cause trouble.
That I cannot promise.
Ally replied. She pulled the silver band from her wrist and used it to tie her hair back in a ponytail. She gathered a deep breath, trying to relax, unsure of how to shake the nerves of running once more into history. Or, in this case, the future.
Make your own history.
She murmured to herself. Sem heard her speak to herself as the sounds of the ark starting up filled the room. He glanced over at her, still trying to keep his attention in front of him.
Good luck,
said Merek as the ark's rings began to spin. The usual buzzing drowned out all the noise from the room. Otto began to slip his goggles on over his head. He stopped to look at them, then tapped Merek on the waist and handed the goggles over for him to wear.
Your turn!
Shouted Otto. Merek put the goggles on. With the mechanized roar of the ark filling the basement, the gateway pulled apart the curtains of space at its core, while Sem and Ally stood ready. A silver star appeared, then grew from a single point into a tall, circular doorway large enough to pass through. Otto and Merek watched with anticipation.
Go for it!
Shouted Otto with a hand raised to shield his eyes. Ahead of her, Ally could see the dark silhouettes of figures through the doorway, all turning their attention toward the growing aura of light. Sem hurried through the gap between worlds, this time with Ally unhesitant at his side. She ran close behind Sem, eventually seeing the light ahead of her pass into darkness. She was suddenly stopped by the impact of what felt like a person's shoulder colliding with her chest, abruptly halting her momentum. Ally pulled the goggles up from her eyes and saw a man and woman standing side by side in front of her, holding their hands up to shield their eyes from the ark. Both wore matching, colored outfits and strange, retro aqua-colored sunglasses. They both jumped back away from her with startled gasps. Ally turned and looked around. Sem lifted his goggles away from his eyes to notice he too had run chest to chest into a man wearing a red, white, and yellow waistcoat in front of him. Standing in the middle of a circular crowd of people, Sem and Ally watched the frightened and curious onlookers observe them, as if they were wild animals in a zoo. The light from the ark faded to a single point. Ally crept close to Sem, feeling claustrophobic and unsure of how to respond.
Sem?
She asked, scanning the circle of people around them.
What now?
The sudden sound of police sirens in the distance caught the crowd's attention. Sem and Ally turned around to see the flash of red, blue, and white lights approaching. The flashing police lights pierced through the crowd to unveil a frightening and unsettling sight. Two shining, metallic, blue police-uniformed androids pushed their way through the crowd toward them. Their glowing eyes glared at the two of them as they marched ever closer.
Now we... run.
Sem grabbed Ally by the hand and sprinted toward the people ahead of them. The crowd suddenly shrieked and parted the way for them. The androids took off in a heated sprint, ready to follow in close pursuit. Ally desperately tried to keep pace with Sem's long strides. The two travelers pushed through the crowded sidewalk, dodging and weaving through the streets of surprised pedestrians and more plastic and metallic androids.
This way!
Shouted Sem, running past a woman who grasped her child's hand in fright. Ally could feel Sem's tight grip beginning to slip. Her hands were growing wet with sweat. Moving through a crowded gap between buildings, they abruptly stopped in front of a metal and glass railing overlooking the overhang into the bottomless depths of the city. They had reached a dead end. Standing stunned, Sem and Ally saw an endless sea of tall glass buildings around them, all connected by a massive network of bridged highways and walkways, weaving and crossing between skyscrapers. The skyscrapers shimmered off the glass in the sunlight, bathing the city in its warm refraction. Ally looked over the edge of the metal railing to see a gloomy darkness below, far down at the base of each building. A place too far down for even the light to touch. The crowd behind them screamed. Sem turned around to see one of the police androids rushing toward him at a frightening pace. The first android stopped, toe-to-toe with him. It clasped its cold metal fingers around his neck and hoisted him up into the air. Sem struggled to break free of its strong grip. Ally jumped back away from the android as it rotated its plastic, slit red eyes directly at her. The second android soon followed, hurrying directly toward her at the same frightening pace. Ally raised her hands above her head as fast as she could before the android reached her, hoping it wouldn't grab her the same way. The android stopped in front of her and raised its arms to each side of her, ready to grab her if she attempted to escape. Ally studied its teardrop-shaped, humanoid face. The android holding Sem looked back at him, seeing Ally had been secured.
Remain calm.
Said one of the androids in a monotone male voice.
Please refrain from struggling. You are being identified.
The androids looked at Sem and Ally. Sem struggled to pry himself free of the android still holding him by the throat. The android's red eyes both flared as they emitted a mechanized scanning sound at the same time, looking the two of them over from top to bottom. The android holding Sem placed him back down on his feet and released its grip from his throat. With their eyes returning to a normal and less frightening appearance, the two android officers stood side by side at attention, hands resting at their sides.
Identities unknown. Requesting extensive information.
Said the android in front of Sem.
At least they know English here.
Said Ally with her hands still in the air. The android in front of Ally looked down at Sem's leg and began scanning him. It knelt and sprung a sharp, pointed needle from the tip of its finger.
Injury assessment. Sprained tibia, tissue damage, and lacerations.
Said the android as it grabbed Sem's leg.
Hey! Let go of me!
Hollered Sem, trying to pull his leg back. The android poked at Sem's leg through his pants with the needle as Sem shouted in pain. The android removed the needle and released Sem's leg before standing back up at attention. The needle projecting from its finger turned red hot, sterilizing as it retracted.
Injury has been mended.
Sem rubbed his leg where the android had injected the needle before standing back upright and twisting his leg around, feeling the sprain in his leg had dissipated.
Wow. Thanks. I guess.
You are most welcome.
The android replied, nodding its head. It looked back over at Ally.
You may put your arms down now, miss.
Ally looked around with an uncertain expression. She lowered her arms back down to her sides.
Extensive search complete. Unknown error. No information found. No actions can be authorized.
Said the first android. Both androids turned in place and walked away from Sem and Ally in a casual manner. A crowd had now gathered around the two unrestrained convicts. Sem lifted his pant leg up to examine his now healed leg. The marks from his injury were still there, but somehow they felt better.
What was that all about?
Asked Ally, confused.
I think we broke them. They couldn't do anything because our identities weren't in their system. I guess.
Replied Sem, standing back up.
Why did they chase us then?
Probably because we ran. Why run unless you have something to hide? Now, let's hurry up and get moving before they grow a mind of their own.
Sem and Ally gently pushed their way through the crowd around them, trying not to draw any more attention to themselves. Upon putting enough distance between themselves and the location where they had been confronted by the robotic officers, Sem pulled Ally to the side at a scenic overlook of the city.
Now, where to start?
Said Sem, walking over to the center of the U-shaped overlook and browsing a three-dimensional holographic map. Ally strolled over to the edge of the city overlook. Out over the railing, she could see a long highway bridge packed bumper to bumper with quiet, sleek-bodied cars of all shapes and colors. The same futuristic cars could be seen through the bottom of the glass bridge above her, moving at the same steady pace. A digital billboard hung over the highway, playing its advertisement video in a continuous loop.
MCN. Say goodbye to fear, and hello to safety and security you can trust. With our new MCN's artificial intelligence helpers, fear is obsolete. Now integrated with the latest MCN cloud system, allowing for even faster response times and swift help when you need it the most.
Played the message, showing the android officers from before as a new product for the commercial. Ally snickered.
Even the endless ads haven't changed. I could get used to this.
Ally murmured, taking in the cool breeze over the white noise of the echoing city.
I guess we can try following these two bridges in a circle near where we first arrived. Keep an eye out for anyone acting strange.
Said Sem, his attention entirely on the map.
You're so bad at taking in the sights.
Never enough time. Whoever said time is money clearly meant that time is more valuable than money. And time is a precious thing for us that we cannot waste.
He replied, slipping his backpack off and setting it on the side of the map console. He bent down and opened his bag to pull out a notebook and paper before standing back upright to draw out the map for his own reference.
Why don't we just ask someone for help?
Ally asked as she sat on the bench near the overlook railing.
As much as that helped us the last time, I don't think we'll be lucky enough to run into any kings here.
He replied, drawing the map on his notebook. Ally leaned back and looked up at the bridges above her. Sem glanced back to see her basking in city sunlight. The radiant glow surrounding her caught his eye for a moment, leaving him lost in a world of his own creation. He cleared his throat and turned back to the map. Closing her eyes, Ally listened to the sounds of the busy city. The subtle nudge of a small rubber ball bouncing around at her feet caught her attention. She opened her eyes and looked down. She leaned over and picked up the blue rubber ball resting at her feet and looked down at it curiously. She sat upright only to spot a large, fuzzy, black and white border collie with floppy ears sitting in front of her.
Oh, well, why, hello.
She said, reaching out to pat the dog on the head.
I see I've made my first new friend here.
The happy canine waited for the ball with his tail wagging beneath him. Ally bounced the ball down in front of him. The dog scurried after it before catching the ball and turning around to run the other way. Ally looked up to see a man with long, gray hair and a full beard kneeling as he clapped for the dog. The dog ran back over to him. The man's older, strong physique reminded Ally of her father. He smiled and waved at her as she waved back. He stroked the dog on the head, waiting for it to drop the ball on the ground so he could toss it once again. The dog watched him pick up the ball, excitingly stepping away and watching him in anticipation. Ally smiled and turned her gaze back to the city around her. Sem turned back to see she was still enjoying the view before he leaned down and put his notebook back in his bag.
Now where to start?
Muttered Sem. Sem reached down for his backpack, ready to place it over his shoulders when a flurry of yelling people captured his attention. He stood upright, listening to the commotion. The crowd nearby separated for a young man, dressed only in a green towel wrapped around his waist, running through the crowd. Hot on his trail were the same two android officers, or what appeared to be the same officers, chasing after him at full speed.
Well, that answers that question.
Ally looked over her shoulder just in time to see the half-naked young man turn the corner, along with the android officers. Sem waved at her to follow as he took off.
Come on, before we lose him!
Ally sat up from the bench she was sitting on.
A girl can't even get a moment to herself.
Ally bent to pick up her bag. She suddenly noticed the dog once more ambled up to greet her with the ball in its mouth, ready to place the slimy gift in her lap. Ally looked up, expecting to see the man with gray hair clapping for the dog once again, only to find he was now nowhere in sight. She reached down for the dog's ball, hoping to find a collar clasped around its neck. The dog's neck was bare. She stood up, reluctant to leave the dog by itself, but she knew she had no choice if she wanted to catch up to Sem. She dropped the ball on the ground for the dog to pick up and patted it on the head before she took off at a sprint.
Go on! Go home, boy!
Ally shouted as she hurried after her ever-impatient traveling companion.
Hey everyone, this is Tre Davies, the voice of the androids from Sem Adventures Across Time. If you've enjoyed your adventure across time so far, be sure to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/TS Wieland. With your support, you'll gain early access to the next chapter of the book and even a copy of the book itself. With your contribution, more thrilling and inspiring audiobooks can be made every day through the hard work, time, and dedication of voice actors and artists all across the world, including myself, all working together. From all of us here in the world between worlds, we'd like to thank you for joining us on our adventures.